years of living in Glendale, there's no better place than Glendale.
I have this romantic, wonderful feeling about Glendale, that it was a fabulous place to grow up as a kid. We had a lot of freedom. I was on my bike all the time. We would just wander, through the town with very little fear that anything would happen to you.
Glendale is an interesting community because you do have people that are fairly wealthy people. You've got a lot of middle-class people, and you have people that aren't so well off.
And is representative in some really interesting ways, I think, of small-town American life, in the sense that the town was segregated, and it was very class structured.
Earliest memories of Glendale was that this is a very rural and country kind of a village for what I call the African or black kids in Glendale. Our families were deeply rooted in Southern traditions.
And like I said, we were very family oriented. So, as far as, I know certain times of the year the families would all come together.
The old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, was a functional concept in Glendale. The first thing is that there were so many of us that were related in some kind of way.
All of the blacks in Glendale were working class, lower middle class people in terms of their lifestyles, but they all in some way had a relationship with the white elite in the center of town.
They worked as domestics, they worked as yard people, and labored in the valley industries and so forth. So there was, I think, familial or closeness that developed, and many of the black people who worked in homes, in essence, became part of that family, really. And there was due respect accorded and dignity. And that, I'm not saying underneath there still wasn't a sense you're different because you're black, and you're different because you're white, and you're very affluent and very successful.
It was common here that our parents were the servants of our schoolmates' parents. That was common. Chauffeurs, gardeners, cooks, maids, that was real common. And that was bothersome for me because, sometimes as a child, your self-esteem is kind of interwoven with how you see your parents. And it was something that, and I don't even know why I didn't, but I just didn't like the notion, the idea that she worked for them.
I had my brother, one time he was helping us, and I don't know what was going on in his mind. He'd look at the people and say, all that money. He didn't know what those people had, or had money or not. They were a guest there, and all he had to do was serve them a drink and get his pay. But do you know that he was so mixed up, and he didn't like this, and he just left. He couldn't do it. He could not stay there. And he just didn't do it. But, if you've got that attitude, you cannot do that kind of work.
First of all, in this situation with Glendale, a lot of the people that lived in Glendale worked for the rich people in Glendale. And there was a control factor, see. And you were kept under control because in a lot of cases they owned your house, and you worked for them, or you worked in a company that they were owners in, or something of this nature, or big wheels of some kind. And if you got on outs with them, you could lose everything.
But there was a certain amount of, which must have been annoying to the blacks, a certain amount of paternal feeling. You take care of that, and you take the basket of fruit up there, and you make sure that the people you knew, the black people you knew, or the less fortunate white people you knew, were taken care of.
When Christmas came around, Mom and Daddy didn't have a lot of money. Like I said, Daddy was a janitor, and he held 2 or 3 jobs at a time, not making a whole lot of money. Now, this is early 60s I'm speaking of. And Mr. Braun would buy our Christmas She'd get us Christmas stuff.
The Benedicts, they let Mom borrow money to send my youngest sister to school. I don't know if she ever paid it back or not.
Unsaid Glendale will always have a special place in my personal growth and development. I mean, I can remember sermons that Reverend Waldrop gave. This is 30 years later, but the message that he was trying to get across, and his genuineness and his skill.
And I remember going to Sunday school and going to choir practice. I would do that at Mount Zion because everybody in the neighborhood did.
It was a rallying point for the spiritual growth of the community.
And I also decided not to be baptized.
I remember when I got baptized, they run us all in there in these long, I mean, it wasn't nothing but a oversized, it was a nightgown. And they would fill up this pool up behind the pool pit, and the way they heated it was they set a fire and put big rocks on the fire, and when they got hot, they come in there and drop it in the water. And that's what heated the water up. And so now it's time for me to get baptized. Boy, when they threw my butt in that water, it was cold as hell.
The schools were segregated when I grew up, of course, in the 40s and the 50s. The elementary school was a segregated situation where black children went to the Eckstein school.
I went to elementary school at Eckstein. Matter of fact, kindergarten.
Going to school was the first introduction really to people that didn't look like me. And so it was uncomfortable. I don't think they tried to make it so. That's just the way it was.
And then my first grade, I went to Glendale Elementary School. I went there from first grade to sixth grade. And we had a lot of fun when we were there. I enjoyed my time at Glendale Elementary School. I went to school with a lot of the kids, white kids that lived in the village, and we didn't have any problems. We went to school, we had a good time.
My early years in school, I actually wasn't there. And what I mean by that is that the books that we read, I wasn't there.
And I remember when we got to high school, we were arguing for a Black history class, and they had none, of course. They didn't have one African American history class in 1972, and we fought for one, and we got one. And there were not just black students fighting for that. There were white students who thought that was a good idea.
Black Americans had been a part of this village from the very beginning.
It was clearly a segregated community.
Glendale, when it comes to race relations or ethnic relations, is always kind of, it's like the ostrich putting their head in the hole. They just don't see it, And I don't think they want to see it. I think they want the pristine image that everyone's happy and everything's okay and this is a great place, and I think they're very comfortable with that.
Glendale was kind of like, it was almost like a plantation, really, where things was run in a real subtle way to keep you in check.
There were sort of unspoken rules, like you didn't go into the igloos and sit down at the soda fountain.
There was definitely a line. Fanny Hibbett's would never be at the ballroom at the Lyceum dancing. She'd be in the kitchen cooking.
The issue that was there between blacks and whites wasn't talked about a lot. And as I say, within the village of Glendale, I don't believe it really was a major issue.
We'd always have to ride bikes over to St. Edmunds, but we would go swimming in the summertime. And we'd, ride or walk over to St. Edmunds to go swimming.
We were only allowed to swim over St. Edmunds on a Monday, and that was. And then after we were finished, they were going to treat the pool, change the water, I don't know, whatever it was. And I mean, it was a lot of hot days that we just could not swim.
There were no other pools other than the one at the Lyceum, which you were not going to swim there.
Certain things were understood. You weren't going to the Lyceum, so you understood that, so you didn't go.
I've never been on the property of the Lyceum. That's one of those places where you drive past and you don't even, it's like when we grew up with this place over here. I didn't give the Lyceum that much thought.
The other situation where I was also made aware that, for some reason there's something different between blacks and whites was Glendale used to lease the St. Edmunds swimming pool. And it was open to the residents of Glendale to swim. But black children were only permitted to swim on the last day of the week. I think they didn't have a circulation system in the pool, and so every week they drained the pool and refilled it. But black children were only allowed to swim on the day before they were going to drain it. And I remember asking my mother and father about that. Well, why is that? And they said, well, some people think because they're black they're going to dirty the pool. I mean, that wasn't their thoughts, but that was sort of the thinking.
So Miss Glanton came along, and she got the mothers around it, got the mothers around here together, and they went over and marched on Town Hall, and that's how they made it where we could swim over in St. Edmunds every day.
There was some talk about building a pool one time up in the old Salvation Army.
I couldn't imagine what our parents had to deal with, because if they're fighting for a swimming pool on this side and they have to work in the house of the very people saying, no, there's not going to be a pool there. Well, of course, when you're at work, you shut up, and you just listen and you accept things as they are.
With the pool, it did sort of divide the village.
We wanted that pool. We wanted the city to do something, wanted to repair the pool for us, and they refused to do it. I don't know why, but they wouldn't do it. They just went on and filled it in.